Okay. Before we commence, let's take a few moments to worship the Supreme One, the infinitely compassionate One, the Sublime One, the Blessed One, the Supreme Buddha. To do this, can you all be upstanding and recite the Namaskar with me? Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, you may you may now all be seated. Okay, before we commence, before we inaugurate, let's take a few moments to make before we inaugurate, let's take a few moments to make the determination. So, may the qualities of the great Arhats enter my life and be part and parcel of them. May I be able to accumulate these qualities, and may these help me to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Okay, having made the firm determination, let's begin. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the story of an Arhat who was definitely one of the unluckiest people to ever be alive. Now, you could ask, why is that? Why is he unlucky? Well, you'll see as we go through the story how his whole life was terrible, a misery. And how even the Buddha can't help you all the time. Okay then, let's go back in time to the Buddha Gautama in the city of Shushamagira. So in the city lived a very rich man. And when I mean rich, I mean he was a billionaire. He was extremely successful. Whenever he invested in something, for example, a new business, he would get a large profit in return. And that business would help him get more and more money. So he was extremely satisfied with his businesses, but he always wanted more. Because he had a lot of money, he had a lot of businesses in properties, shops, merchants, but his main source was import and export from other countries and foreign islands as well. So you can imagine he lived a life of luxury. He had 100 servants working under him, a beautiful wife that loved him very dearly, a colossal mansion with everything, with a lot of bedrooms, bathrooms, maybe even a pond, and so on and so forth. And he only wore the finest of clothes, rode the finest of carriages, led by premium stallions. And you can guess, he only ate the divinest of food, drank only the expensive wines. He had the money. So he was living almost a heavenly life as a human. Now to him, his luck was with him all the time. Because one day, his wife bore him a beautiful daughter. She was stunning. She had golden colored skin with big eyes. You could say her father, so Bodha, that's his name, was the luckiest man alive to have her. And as she grew of age, she was gorgeous. She was the idol of beauty. She was extremely attractive. The sight of her was literally breathtaking. But it wasn't just her smile that made everyone stop and admire her. She was a person with a pure heart, a person who cares dearly for others, no matter who they are, no matter what caste. She had a pure heart. But anyway, she was the best thing that happened to Bodhi's life. And so when she grew of age, and it was an age to be married, many men from all around the city, neighboring cities, the whole country would come to his house and request for her hand in marriage. He decided he wanted the best for his daughter. And so he put up some conditions for her future husband. So he said, "Dear future husband of the daughter of mine, to have her hand in marriage, you must match my caste, match my status, match my wealth, have all these assets, have a big house like mine. But no matter how much you have, you must be pure of heart as well. If all these conditions are fulfilled, I promise you, you have her hand." So these conditions were very tight, because many people would have turned back after hearing some of the first one or the second one. Because you can imagine, he was a person of a high caste, a very good status, and he was a billionaire. He was one of the richest people in the whole country. The assets he had, the house he had, are unmatchable. But no matter what these people had, to have a pure heart is very rare. I feel that Bodha was looking more for the pure heart than the assets. Because the pure heart would make her daughter happy. The assets would just make her live more comfortably. And so many people would have turned away and said, "We can't match these conditions. If you have a change of mind, we'll come back. Don't worry." But one day, we all have heard of the banker Anathapindika. He was also very rich, right? He heard these requests and thought that this young lady would be perfect for his son. So he could match his caste. He can match his status, because they both were very respectable men. And he can match their wealth. Because, as you remember, the banker Anathapindika bought Jetavanarama, or the land for it, by placing gold coins to cover the land. Think about it. That's a lot of money. But anyway, he went to Bodha and requested for her daughter. And so Bodha took his list out and checked all of it. Caste, status, wealth, assets, house, pure of heart. Luckily, Anathapindika's son was very pure-hearted. And we know that he becomes a Sotapan in his life. Whether it was before this or after this, I don't know, but he becomes a Sotapan. So Bodha was most happy to give her hand to the son of Anathapindika. Now you can guess, right? When two billionaires come together to make a wedding, you can imagine the size. Thousands of guests, from rich barons, maybe to even royalty. They served the greatest food, and you could say they had the greatest time of their life. And at the end of the wedding, Bodha was happy. He was happy for his daughter. And as she leaves him to spend the rest of life with her husband, he decided to continue his life as well with his businesses for the next few months like normal. So far, Bodha is having a great life in his eyes. Everything is almost perfect. And he thought something like that's going to stay there with him forever. Unfortunately, it didn't. Because one morning he woke up with a bad feeling. He felt like something was different with him. Something that wasn't right. And so when he got off the bed, immediately he stubbed his toe. And he thought that was the first sign of bad luck. And that was only the beginning. So he went down for breakfast, and Seven came up to him with urgent news. Sir, I have some news for you. One of your merchant ships have collided with some sharp rocks, and it ripped a hole in it. Sir, unfortunately, only minimum amount of items on the boat was saved. Most of the treasures was sunk with the ship, and it cannot be recovered. I'm extremely sorry, sir. I'm extremely sorry to disturb you with bad news first thing in the morning. And so Bodha dismissed this. You're dismissed. Thank you for the message. And as the son left, never had Bodha had anything like this before. I had bad news first thing in the morning. But he knew that it's normal for a business to drop once in a while. So he thought it was normal. But then in the next few months, unfortunately, some of the businesses had to close. Some of his property were raided. More and more of these ships have sunk, raided, he was losing more than he was profiting. And while all this was happening, his wife was bloating, becoming bigger and bigger. His beautiful wife was growing in size for no apparent reason. In few months, from a perfect life to a life of disaster, his whole world seemed to be crashing in. There had to be a reason. There had to be a reason why he was becoming unsuccessful. It couldn't be just because. And so he went to a soothsayer and asked him, "Soothsayer, please explain to me why my businesses are collapsing and why I have all this bad luck." The soothsayer thought for a moment and replied, "Sir, it seems like all your misfortune is because your wife is pregnant and she will have a baby boy. But Bodha's always heard that babies are something that brings joy and happiness to lives, brings fortune." The soothsayer replied, "Yes, but it looks like your child would only bring you misfortune and nothing more. I suggest you get rid of him while you still can, before he causes more problems." But Bodha thought about this. No. He will give me good. I will not kill him. He will live. I love him no matter what. I will not kill him. I don't care if my businesses collapse. I will not kill my son. Think about it. He's sacrificing his luxury for this son. Because this son is the thing that's bringing all this bad luck. Think about it. Like a major issue in the world today. Abortion. Bodha decided, no matter what happens to my life, I will not kill my child, my son. And so Bodha left without saying a word. He was overjoyed to hear that he's going to have a son. So he spread the news about having a baby boy to everyone and explained why his wife's stomach was increasing in size day by day. And he thought he'll live a happy life again. But unfortunately, his misfortunes, like the soothsayer said, weren't decreasing, they were increasing instead. It came a time where Bodha couldn't handle the stress because all of his businesses were not giving him enough profit. And this stress was unable to bear. He couldn't go to sleep as he was scared that when he wakes up, he's going to be bombarded with more problems and more bad things happening that need solving. He couldn't eat like he used to. Anyway, the quality of his food was decreasing due to the loss of money. There was a limit. His patience came to that limit. So he left enough money to maintain the house and for food for his wife, servants, and for all their bare necessities. And he decided he wanted to take a vacation, a holiday. So he went for the nearest forest to have a long, deserving vacation for a while until all this settles. So Bodha's life is utterly ruined. And he decides he wants to leave all this behind and go into the forest and live or have a holiday in the forest while everything settles. You can imagine him telling his wife and servants, don't come and disturb me unless it's good news. Because he's also human, right? He can't handle all of this bad misfortunes happening. And he did the right thing, right? So he left enough money for his wife and servants. He didn't completely abandon them. And so one day while Bodha was in the forest, and you can imagine him enjoying some fruit, a servant came running into the forest, shouting, I've got great news, great news. I come bearing great news for my master. Now hearing this, Bodha was surprised. Good news? Finally some good news. And so he says, please tell me, servant. I've been waiting a long time to hear such words. And so the servant exclaimed, saying, Sir, I come bearing great news. Your son has been born. Now this made Bodha extremely happy to hear that his son has been born. But just before he could say something about this, say that, wow, that's very good, that's great news. Before he could say that, another servant came running into the forest and said, Master, your house is on fire. At the moment of your child's birth, a fire appeared in the house. Luckily, no one's injured, but the fire has destroyed parts of it. At the birth of his child, a fire appeared in the house. It didn't kill anyone, luckily, but it destroyed the house, right? But Bodha thought about this and said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if my house burns down. My child is born. And I'm going to give him a good name, a great name, in fact. I'm going to name him Good Comings, because he will bring good comings. So he named him Sāgatha. But Sāgatha brought a lot of fortune to the family. Their house burning down was only the beginning. Their house was ransacked. So thieves came in and stole from them. Merchant ships were burnt for no apparent reason. Even Bodha's most trusted ship sunk with the crew. His banks were raided. Scams, bribes, murders. The list of disasters were endless. One after the other, after the other, after the other, on and on and on and on. His life was disastrous. But through all that, Bodha, the father, would not let any of this harm the baby, Sāgatha. For many months, years maybe. He wouldn't say to Sāgatha, it's all your fault. It's because of you our house was burnt down. It's because of you these thieves came into our house 3 times this week and stole from us. It's because of you we can't eat our food. He has never said that. Bodha was a sponge. He let all the water soak up inside him and not let any of that water harm his child. Now that is a great parent. That is a great father. He didn't let anyone else stress about it. He took the stress for himself. That is a sacrifice, though, isn't it? He sacrificed himself for others. He is now storing all of this suffering inside of him and not letting it harm others. He was a great father. But obviously, there's a certain limit that a man can handle stress. This has all happened in a very short period of time. And also he was aging as well. So his age was against him, and all the stress wasn't good for his health. So Boza's life unfortunately ended shortly after. And a few days later, his wife also went with him. But remember, all of this happened because of Sāgatha, the son. So the death of his parents meant nothing. The misfortunes were still there. Now the worst happened. All the big businesses, the businesses that didn't need much maintenance because they were working perfectly, they were all bankrupt. And they had to be closed or handed over to another person. Their house, the house that Sāgatha lived in, was rummaged, ransacked by thieves many times over. There wasn't as much as a penny or a single piece of money in the house. Soon all the ships were destroyed, sunk, burnt. All the property was destroyed or stolen. Now Sāgatha was surrounded by all this. Remember, his father was a sponge, right? But Sāgatha was very young. He can't handle all this. So he lived years in a world where everything was collapsing in front of his own eyes. Like property, money, status. You can imagine people didn't even visit the house anymore. Because one, the house was a terrible mess. Two, because they thought if they went inside the house, they'll become unlucky as well. And three, they just didn't want to. Sāgatha wasn't a person who they like anymore, because he's the one who bought all this, right? Now, as you remember, in this house, this massive mansion, there were hundreds of servants, cooks, chauffeurs. But having seen all this happening, they thought if they live in this house for any longer, they would have bad luck as well, or they will die as well. And so they took all their belongings and anything else in the house that they can carry. Whether it's food, whether it's kitchenware, whether it's furniture, they'll take those and they ran away. So you can imagine Sāgatha lived in a completely empty house. There was absolutely nothing, not even a grain of rice. The kitchen was ransacked, was rummaged through. The food has been robbed, kitchenware, movable furniture. It's almost like Sāgatha was left inside the house to starve. Not even his neighbors would come to him, go to his house and give him some food, water, clothes, because they thought if they went near him, this unluckiness would rub against them and they'll become unlucky as well. He became a charm of unluckiness. And we're talking about a very small child, a young child. You guess he doesn't know how to cook, even if he had food. So imagine he would used to sit in a corner and just wait there. You can imagine for years he thought that this was just a nightmare, that he'll wake up to find himself in his mother's arms. And when he wakes up, on the kitchen, there'll be a big meal laid by a beautiful maid. But every day when he wakes up from this dream, reality would smash him in the face. He would wake up not because he had enough sleep. He would wake up because the animal inside of his stomach is scratching the inside. Every single day, people who used to love him would leave. Servants Servants who used to be like friends and family to him would leave. Soon his heart became empty. He had no hope. You can imagine him lying in a corner, unable to understand anything that's happening. But luckily, one day, an old maid who used to work in the house came into the house again and asked Sāgatha if she can work there again. Now Sāgatha was confused. Why did you come back? Look, because I'm so unlucky you guys left. Why do you want to work here again? But this old maid said, Master Sāgatha, this has been your home as well as mine for many years. Even before you were born, I used to work here. Your father was very kind and helped me when I needed help. Your mother was extremely nice and treated me like a mother. Never called me by harsh names. For this, I am thoroughly indebted to them. Therefore, can I please work here? Now, you can take two things from this. Number one, Sāgatha's parents used to treat their servants like people. Servants or workers like people, like family, like friends. So this old maid thought it's her duty to take care of Sāgatha. Now think about how great of people they must have been to make her feel like that. And also, let's look at the maid as well. This maid couldn't bear seeing Sāgatha all by himself. She felt she was indebted to his parents. Now obviously she's a maid, she gets paid. But she felt that for all the work that they've done for her, all the kindness, all the smiles, all that help, she felt indebted to them. She must do something in return. So she decided to come back and help Sāgatha. So Sāgatha's life was empty. Now this old maid had come into his life and brightened his life. You can imagine him waking up the next morning feeling overjoyed that there's one person in his life, one person who came back to care for him. You can imagine even when his house looked like it was haunted almost, that no one was there to care for him, no one was there to help him any sort of way. Even though it was all like that, once this old maid came into his life, he felt happy. That it felt like home again. A house turned into a home because of one person. He thought that he was dreaming. And so when he woke up and he went down to have breakfast, the maid said, Master, why are you late? You should have left the house by now. And so Sāgatha was confused. Where am I supposed to go? Well, you're supposed to go to school, aren't you? Have you not been to school soon? Now Sāgatha was overjoyed. He ran into his room with a great smile on his face. He finally had a person who cared about him. So he rummaged through his wardrobe and found some clothes that didn't have holes in it. And so this was his best clothes. And he went and asked for the directions for his new school and left the house without having breakfast. So school, you can imagine, was terrible. The unluckiest person goes to school and you can imagine how school was. But that's not where we're going to go. We're going to go to his house again, stay in his house. So in the house, the maid, obviously looking at this massive house and thinking where she should start, went into a room and started clearing it out. And after she cleaned the room out, she went to the kitchen and decided to make a meal for herself and Sāgatha. Because Sāgatha hadn't eaten breakfast, hadn't had breakfast. So she went to the kitchen and went to the storeroom and found that there's no rice, no vegetables to make curries. She found some coins in the room that she just dusted and used that money to buy a small bag of rice, raw rice. So she prepared the rice. And as she was cooking, as the rice was boiling, she left the kitchen to see if there's anything, like something to make a curry out of. And she came back empty-handed, obviously. And she looked back into this boiling pot and saw that this rice was burnt. There's a black slag at the bottom of the pot. And so she decided to restart She sort of washed the pan, the pot, and prepared the rice again, and then put it in the fire. And again, when she looked at it again, the black slag started to form. So she did one more time. But this time, before she put the pot in the fire, she said, "This rice is for me." Now, in a few minutes, when the rice was cooked, the rice became a pearl white color, and it smelled good for plain rice, and it was soft. So the old maid knew that Sāgatha brought bad luck, that he was the charm of bad luck. She thought that this bad luck was too much to handle. That if she stayed in this house, she won't be able to eat either, because think about it. She said this rice was for her. So she almost cheating her master. And she thought that I can't cheat my master. That's wrong. She's not going to be faithful. So she knew that she had to leave. So she consumed half of the portion of rice and left the other half on the table, took all her personal belongings and left the house. You see, she left because she didn't want to be unfaithful. Because she said this rice was for her, not for her master, Sāgatha. And so it's almost like stealing. And she didn't want to steal. So instead of breaking his heart by telling him that she's going to leave, she took her belongings and left the house. And so when Sāgatha came back home after a terrible day at school, he was expecting to see this old maid, and he was expecting to live a happy life. And so he found that the maid was in the kitchen, was in the rooms, and so he thought that the maid was playing with him. For the whole day he looked for this maid. In the kitchen he found this plate of warm rice, and so he was hungry. So he sat down and saw that this warm rice had mold on it. Well, that's fine, because he can remove the mold and eat it. But he heard a noise in the front, in the lounge. And so he went in the lounge to see if the maid was there, but so instead saw a dog. And so he went back in the kitchen and found another dog eating his meal, having licked the plate clean. The house was completely empty, just like Sāgatha's heart. His home was no longer a home, it was a house. He started to attract dogs. It became a dog den. Dogs will howl. Sāgatha couldn't go to sleep. So Sāgatha went back into his room and held his stomach and cried his heart out. Everyone he loved left him. His stomach was burning with the acid. His heart was burning like it was on fire. Both he and the house were a place for people just to come, take, and not give back. But it was that moment that he remembered. He has relatives. He has people who used to love him. Relatives, uncles, aunts. And they were extremely nice, and they also had food. So Sāgatha thought that he could go there and ask his aunt and uncle for a meal and a place to stay, and until he can put his life back together. So when he went there, he went to the front gate and called out, "Uncle, aunt, are you home?" But there wasn't a reply. He called out again, and instead this time he jumped over the gate. I went to the front yard. Now knocked on the door. No one seems to answer. He opened the door. That's when he saw the uncle and aunt fight. They are having an argument. And they were shouting at each other, screaming at each other. And at that moment they saw Sāgatha. And they shouted, "Get out! Why are you in our house? You're full of bad luck. Don't give our house bad luck." And you can imagine what sort of mood they were in. They were having an argument just a minute before. They were screaming their heads off. And so Sāgatha said, "Please, all I want is some food. We don't have food for you. Get out." And so Sāgatha, with his eyes full of tears, went out. So he decided he wanted to find some food, so he went to his other relative's house. Again, this other relatives didn't accept him, told him to go out. "You are bad luck. We don't want you. You are not our relative." And so his relatives have abandoned him, have not accepted him, had no food, no money. The only thing he had was himself and the rags, the old ripped clothes he was wearing. So he was homeless. He has nothing. So he went round town to town looking, begging for food. But no one gave him anything. He was the unluckiest person alive. And so he went round, and one day he found a group of beggars who worked together to find food. And it was a very large group, and so he decided he's going to join without saying much. So that day, the group of beggars went out to beg for food, and everyone came back with nothing. They didn't have any food. Second day, they went out again, and again they came back empty-handed. Third, fourth, fifth, until they realized that something's not right. Something was different. Because usually they would find at least some food. But for 5 days in a row, they couldn't. So they thought that it had to be someone in the group. Someone who's done some bad karma or has very unlucky. That is because of them that this group doesn't have any food. And so the head or the leader asked them, is anyone unlucky? And obviously no one answered. And so the leader separated the group into halves. So he separated the group into two and sent them both two different ways. And obviously the half without Sāgatha got a lot of food. The group with Sāgatha got nothing. And then the second day, the group that got nothing was separated into two groups. And again, so the group without Sāgatha got the food, and the group with Sāgatha didn't. And they went on and on and on and on until it was just Sāgatha and one other beggar. And obviously, the other beggar got a lot of food and Sāgatha didn't get any. And so Sāgatha was kicked out, was thrown out this group, and was told never to return. So again, he's left with nothing. Back to square one. So again, he's a beggar, a lone beggar, going street to street, door by door, to find some food. And so one day, as he was roaming a town, a man came up to him. And this man said, "You look familiar. Do I know you?" "No, I'm a beggar." "You look like someone I know." "Wait, do you know someone called Bodha?" "Yes, of course, he's my father." "So you're the son of Bodha." And so his father's friend started to talk with him, asking him about how happened to his father, how his father is, about his businesses. And so Sāgatha started to explain about how he died and how his businesses were all lost and how he became a beggar. And so this father's friend said, but surely your sister would help you, right? Did she not do anything about it?" And that's when Sāgatha remembered, "Oh, I have a sister. I can ask her." And so Sāgatha doesn't know how to travel around town. And so he asked his father's friend whether he knew where she lived. And obviously he did. And told Sāgatha, my merchant's trail will go past our house. You can follow us and we'll lead you there. But for the time being, take these two gold coins, and buy yourself some food and clothes. So we don't want you to be like a beggar while traveling with us. And so Sāgatha takes these 2 coins and puts it in his sarong, or rolls it in his sarong, and completely forgot about them. So he decided to follow this friend of his father, and the moment he entered the trail, so he joined one of the carriages. The merchants on board this carriage started to fight, started to argue. A rift started to form between everyone. No one could cooperate with others. It was every man for himself. And then they realized, wait, that's Sāgatha. That's Bodha's son. I've heard so much about him, how he's bad luck. And they started to argue about they can't travel with Sāgatha. And so his uncle had unfortunately come to the decision that, Sāgatha, you can't travel with us anymore. He said that in front of everyone, because all the merchants on board this trail doesn't want you to be in this trail. So unfortunately, due to everyone's wish, you can't join the trail. And so Sāgatha had to leave. But just before he left, this uncle came up to him and said, "But you can follow us secretly. Here, I'll separate a portion of my meal and I'll hide it either in the trees or I'll hide it in holes for you to have every time I have a meal. You can have those. Have that portion." So having heard all this, Sāgatha decided to follow this trail. And so just like the uncle promised, he would leave portions out either in the trees or under in some holes. But unfortunately, before Sāgatha could go and get these food, birds on the trees would eat the food on the trees, and the dogs would dig the hole and eat the food. You see, throughout the whole journey, and this journey may have taken days and days, but throughout this whole journey, Sāgatha didn't have a single grain of rice to eat. Nothing. But because of his perfections to become an arhat, no matter how hungry he was, he doesn't die. So after days of travels restlessly, he found a pond and decided that he couldn't walk any further with his trail. And so he decided he needed some sleep and needed some water, and went to the pond, drank as much water as he possibly could, and fell asleep right next to the pond. At that time, an elderly servant from his sister's house came to the pond and saw Sāgatha lying there on the floor and thought, "Wait, I recognize you. Wait, oh, you're Bodhi's son, right? You're my master's brother. Wait, what happened to them?" She asked disrespectfully. She asked because in her eyes, Sāgatha wasn't the son of a billionaire. Instead, was a beggar. And so after hearing all the news, went to her master and told her master, "I saw your brother today. He wanted to come and meet you." And so she asked, "When is he arriving? What's he going to bring?" And so the servant replied saying, "He's a beggar. He's going to come back with nothing but himself and an empty hand." Now, the sister has to think about this, because she can't just let Sāgatha into her house without making everyone suspicious. Because she can't let him into the house and say, "This is my brother," because her status has to be preserved. And anyway, she can't just take a beggar into her house, right? There has to be something done about it. And she obviously can't not let him come to her house, because obviously he's her brother. So she thought about this and said to the servant, "Here, take this bag of money and these clothes, my husband's clothes, and give it to him. Give it to him and tell him specifically to buy some toys, some gifts for your niece and nephew. And make sure you eat something as well before coming. And fatten yourself if he's a bit thin." So, doing as she said, the servant went to the pond and gave this money and clothes and told him the instructions. And so now Sāgatha had some money and some clothes. Now the first thing that comes to Sāgatha's mind is, "I have a bag of money, a lot of money, a bag of gold coins. Wait, I haven't eaten in many days." So he goes on the street and walks around and sees a shop. This shop looks very interesting and goes inside it. But this shop wasn't something that sells food, it was a distillery. So he went inside and bought a large jug of alcohol. So imagine he was extremely hungry, right? And instead of having food, he took this jug of alcohol and chugged it all down, and within no time, he was absolutely smashed. He was drunk. So just like drunk people do, they stumble on the street. And Sāgatha also, stumbling, mumbling, singing drunken songs. He slipped and fell under a tree, where he decided to rest for the night. So having drunk a lot of alcohol, having been drunk, he slept like a log. As in like a log, I mean something that's almost dead. So a group of bandits went up to Sāgatha and they decided they're going to wake him up. He looks drunk. So, and he smells drunk anyway. So if he wakes up, they'll warn him saying that there's a group of bandits nearby. You have to take care of yourself more than sleep under a tree. But if he doesn't wake up, they're going to rob from him. They're going to mug him. And so they went to Sāgatha and they tapped him on the shoulder. Nothing. They started to shake him. Nothing. They even kicked him. Nothing. No reply. He was fast asleep. And so they didn't need to do anything extra. They found the bag of money nearby and took that. Took the clothes those expensive clothes that his sister gave and ran off with that. So when Sāgatha woke up and had his hangover, he found out that he had no money and he's back with his rags. And because he just had a lot of alcohol, he was extremely thirsty and extremely hungry. See, he drank the alcohol to suppress hunger, but unfortunately it didn't. It made him hungrier. You see what alcohol does to people? So now he went on begging. His job was begging on the streets. So he went begging and begging, house to house, getting almost nothing. And so his sister got very suspicious and said to her servant, shouldn't Sāgatha have been here about a week ago? It's been about a month. Do you know where he is? And so she sent her servant out to look for him. And so when she went into the town, she saw that Sāgatha was begging on the street again and asked him about the money and clothes, and he explained that he used the money to drink, and he got drunk, and he got mugged. And so the servant again retold the story to her master, and Sāgatha's sister gave up the idea of helping him. That she can't help him any further. She tried her hardest, but unfortunately, he couldn't get help. So Sāgatha hasn't eaten for days, maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe even years. Who knows? And living a life as a beggar, sleeping on the streets. He went from a child of a billionaire who had everything to a homeless beggar. And so when he was begging around the street, he heard another beggar talking to someone else, talking about alms giving at Anathapindika's house, where they give food for beggars, free food. And so Sāgatha finally thought that he'll have something to eat. That Anathapindika will give him some food and he'll finally be able to fill his completely empty stomach. And so he decided to go there. And at the moment he found the house and he stepped into line. Anathapindika stood up and said, "Today we're not going to give alms or give food for the beggars. We're going to give all the food to the Mahasangha." Now all these beggars were confused because Anathapindika has never said anything like that. This is the first time he's ever said something like that. And so they knew that something wasn't right. And so they looked in the crowd, looked in line, and so the last person in line was Sāgatha. And everyone in the whole country knew about him. Now people started to get angry, people started to get rowdy, and started to push him. Old men with walking sticks, old women with walking sticks would use their walking sticks to hit him. So having been hurt, injured, punched, Sāgatha was bleeding all over. They carried him to a dump yard and threw him there and screamed at him, "If you dare come back, we have no choice but to murder you." Now Sāgatha had to live in a dump yard with nothing but himself, no food, and if he steps outside this dump yard, he'll be murdered. And so he's threatened. He was extremely hungry, hadn't had food, doesn't have water, doesn't have friends, doesn't have family, nothing. He needs something. At that moment, the Buddha, the Supreme Buddha, went past the dump yard to go to Anathapindika's house for alms. And he saw Sāgatha in the dump yard crying. So he went inside and asked Sāgatha, "Are you hungry?" "Yes, Venerable Sir, I'm famished. Please, can I have something to eat?" "Sāgatha, if I gave you some food from my alms bowl, would you take it?" "Yes, Venerable Sir, most definitely." And so the Buddha turned to the Venerable Ananda and said, "Ananda, after the Bhuktanamodana, or the short sermon rejoicing in the merits that they've done, please send my alms bowl to Sāgatha so he can eat." Having said that, the Buddha left the dump yard to go for alms. But due to his bad karma, after the Bhuktanamodana, Venerable Ananda completely forgot that he had to give the alms bowl. It was only when the Buddha reminded him, saying, "Ananda, did you give the alms bowl?" did Ananda remember that he had to. He looked inside the alms bowl and the alms bowl was empty, cleaned. And so Ananda started to cry. The Venerable Ananda started to cry, saying, "Oh, great Buddha, I've never done this before. Everything you've taught me, I remember, and I did. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before. Please, Venerable Sir, would you forgive me?" And so the Buddha replied, saying, "Ananda, it's not your fault. It's because of Sāgatha's bad karma that you forgot to give him the food. But Ananda, could you go there and call him for me?" And so Venerable Ananda went to the dump yard and said, "Sāgatha, the Buddha has called you. Come with me." Not a single reply. He'd even turn his head. Again, "Sāgatha, the Buddha has called you. Come with me." Again, no reply. Third time, and Ananda left, thinking that Sāgatha was deaf. Yeah, he didn't understand the words that was coming out of his mouth. Went to the Buddha and said, "Oh, Venerable Sir, I told him to come, but he couldn't hear me. I called him, but he didn't know." And so the Buddha replied, saying, "Ananda, due to the bad merits he had done, he had forgotten his name. So go back to him and say, Bodhi's son, Sāgatha, from the city of Shushamagira, The Buddha has called you. Come with me. And then he'll reply. And so, like he was told, when Mahananda went to the dump yard and recited what he was told to recite, word for word. That's when Sāgatha looked and said, "Oh, I'm coming." And so, when Sāgatha went to the Buddha, worshipped the Buddha gave him his alms bowl. So Sāgatha looked inside the alms bowl and saw one mouthful of food, and looked at the Buddha with a sad face, and said, "Venerable Sir, this is not enough. This won't fill me." And the Buddha replied saying, "This may not be enough, but you can't finish it." So Sāgatha was confused. How can I not finish this? And so he put his hand inside the alms bowl and had the first bite. He took the whole mouthful and put it in his mouth. At that moment, another one appeared in the alms bowl. And so he started to eat, started to fill himself. This is one of the best meals he had since he could remember. And after he was full, after the last bite, the rice in the alms bowl disappeared. And the Buddha asked Sāgatha, "Do you have any money, Sāgatha?" And Sāgatha replied saying, "Sir, I'm homeless, I'm a beggar, I have nothing but myself and my clothes." "Sāgatha, why don't you look in your sarong?" And the moment he looked inside his sarong, he found the 2 gold coins that his uncle gave him. And so the Buddha requested, "Sāgatha, go to the nearest florist and buy some blue flowers, buy some blue lilies from the florist with his 2 gold coins." And so he did what he was told. He went to this florist stand, asked the florist for some flowers, but the moment the florist saw him, the florist took out a stick and was about to beat him, to tell him to get out, because everyone knew who he was. Sāgatha was the idol of unluckiness. Like his sister was the idol of beauty, he was the idol of unluckiness. And so before the florist started to beat him, Sāgatha said, "Wait, don't hit me. I've come to fulfill the Buddha's request. He requested me to buy some blue lilies with these 2 gold coins. Please, don't hurt me." The florist, having heard that it was for the Buddha, said, "Take as many as you can and leave quickly." So Sāgatha put the 2 coins on the table and took as many blue lilies as he possibly could and went back to the Buddha. Now here, the Buddha told Sāgatha to go and give one flower to each of the monks present. And so he went to the first monk, and as he gave him a flower, the monk didn't accept it. The Buddha, having seen this, told him to accept the flower. And so he did. The moment the flower touched the monk's hand, the blue lily bloomed and let out its fragrance. When the Sāgatha started handing them out, one after the other, soon the whole room was covered in flowers, covered in this blue color. So the whole room became blue. And that reminded Sāgatha of a meditation that he had done throughout samsara, many lives throughout samsara. And at that moment, the Buddha asked Sāgatha, "Sāgatha, would you like to ordain?" Having remembered all the previous lives which you've done the meditation, he replied yes. So at that moment, the Buddha ordained him and gave him a high ordination as well. Right? Before we conclude, right? I would like to show you the point that Sāgatha lived a life of extreme poverty. Think about it. He used to be the son of a billionaire. From billionaire to a beggar. Everyone in his life disappeared. Everyone he loved, friends, family, everything. He hadn't eaten for days, but let's not forget, because of his perfections to become an arhat, that was the only thing that kept him alive. Now think about how powerful that perfection is. That hunger doesn't kill you because of the perfection. You see, Sāgatha, even though amidst of all this trouble, amidst of all of this physical and mental suffering, he met the Buddha. But the funny thing is, the first thing the Buddha did wasn't said, Sāgatha, sit down and listen to my sermon. That's not what the Buddha did. Because there's no point of doing that. Because the moment the Buddha opens his mouth to preach the Dharma, Sāgatha obviously is extremely hungry. The only thing that comes into his mind is hunger, 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 hunger. That's it. He's unable to understand the Dharma at that moment. The Buddha gave him what he needed. He wanted food. He needed food. Think about it. The Buddha went into a dump yard to save a person. Would you go into a dump yard? Forget about the dump yard. He saw Sāgatha crying in pain and went to him and asked him. Now, how often do you go up to a person who's crying on the street and ask them, what's up? Why are you crying? Is there something I can do to help you? When do you do that? Now you imagine Sāgatha wasn't something great to look at. Because he's a beggar, right? Probably hasn't showered in days, maybe weeks. Probably has long, dirty, brown hair. Probably is very unclean. But the Buddha didn't care. He saw that Sāgatha was in pain, was sad, was suffering. And out of the compassion that he had, he went to Sāgatha into a dump yard, a place where they where they collect rubbish. Think about it. Is your compassion like that? Do you have that much compassion to help a random person who's sad and crying? The Buddha did. The Buddha gave him exactly what he needed. He wanted food. The Buddha knew that he needed to give him food, that he hasn't eaten for days. So that's what he did. The Buddha gave him food. That's maybe the first time he had a good meal, a meal that filled him. But the Buddha gave it. You see, Sāgatha may be the unluckiest person around. But the Buddha didn't care. The Buddha decided, no, I would like to help him. So he did. Let's not also forget, right? So Bodha, Sāgatha's father Bodha, his friend gave, think about it, even though it's a father, his friend's son, right? He gave 2 gold coins to a beggar and helped him. You see, these people are people who don't really care about who the person is. Even though it might be the son of a billionaire. I doubt they did it because the son of a billionaire. They did it because they saw a person in pain. That they knew the person. You see, they don't really care about who you are. I feel like they realize that we are all humans. That you need to help one another. Like the sister was smart to find a way to help Sāgatha without destroying her status. Because she can't live in a house where people think that she came from somewhere poor, so she devised a plan to help. She did the maximum she possibly could. And then when she knew that no matter how much I help him, he can't be helped, she stopped. Because that's not something that she did wrong. That's because of Sāgatha's bad karma. Anyway, it's karma park anyway. She understood that. Let it be. Let's take a few moments to transfer merits. Conclude then. Let's take a moment to transfer the merits we've all acquired by making offerings to the infinite virtues of the Noble Chupa Gem, chanting Pirith, listening to Dharma, and engaging in various meritorious deeds today. So first and foremost, let's remind ourselves how incredibly fortunate we are to be in receipt of the Lord Buddha's teaching. And with immense gratitude, let us transfer the merits to the Bhikshu, Bhikshunis, Upasikas, who since time immemorial have protected and preserved the sublime teaching of Buddha, and passed it down through generation of the noble lineage in form of the Tripitaka, which is thankfully available to us today to study, to understand, to comprehend the Dharma. Let us all transfer the merits required to all the members of the Mahasangha present throughout the world, including the chief priests of all the chapters, who dedicate their lives to noble path and commit themselves to the betterment of all sentient beings. Let us not forget them, among them be the monks and nuns resident in your local temple and nunneries, who have always been by your side through thick and thin, come rain or shine. Let us all transfer merits to Guru Swaminatha and all the other monks present in the monastery, as well as Anagarikas and Anagarikas attached to the monastery. Let us all take a moment to transfer merits and express our gratitude to those who make great efforts to disseminate the teachings of the Buddha, be that by translating these sermons, sharing them out with others, and inviting others to join them. May the power of the merits, if any of them have been born on the woeful plane, may they redeem themselves and be born on the blissful plane. May the power of the merits, may they abstain from the meritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble effort path, and attain supreme Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us all take a moment to transfer merits we've acquired to all our devotees, friends of the monastery, who for sake of merits continue to sustain Mahasangha. This includes every one of you who provide the Mahasangha with shelter, alms, robes, medicines, as well as those who pass on their know-hows, extend their well wishes. May the power of the merits, may they abstain from the meritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble effort path, and attain supreme Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us all take a moment to transfer merits to our mothers, fathers, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, nephews, nieces, elders, friends and acquaintances, employers, employees, and to all those who have helped us, support us, assist us in any way, shape, or form. By the power of the merits, may they be healed of any physical and mental ailments, may they overcome any obstacles in their spiritual progress, may they abstain from the meritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble effort path, and attain supreme Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us all take a moment to transfer merits to the Devas, Brahmanas, spirits, demons, Pirates, Sakradeva, as well as humans, gods, and deities, who are committed to protect and fulfill the sum of this asana. Let us also transfer merits to our guardian deities, who keep watch over life over us and keep us out of harm's way. May the power of the merits, may they prosper in divine power and wisdom, may they abstain from the meritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble effort path, and attain supreme Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us all take a moment to transfer merits to our ancestors who predeceased us, to all those who have been our friends, families, acquaintances in this infinitely long journey samsara, and those who have helped us, support, assist us in any way, shape, or form. Let us transfer these merits. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to all the members of the armed forces, as well as police force, who sacrifice their lives to protect the peace and harmony of our nation. May all those who lost their lives in war be their friend or foe, redressing the merits required today. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to all those who lost their lives in natural calamities such as tsunamis, earthquakes, landslides, pandemics, reminding ourselves that among them will be those who have been friends and family to us in this long journey of samsara. Let us take a moment to transfer merits to them. May the power of the merits, if any of them have been born on the woeful plane, may they redeem themselves and be born on the blissful plane. May they abstain from the meritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble effort path, and attain supreme Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Finally, as a result, may the power and blessing of all the merits required the other day, we be able to witness the event of many hundreds of thousands of our hearts in the blessed land. And finally, may the power of all the merits required there, you and I and everyone who made this program success become Arhat Nivase, or Arhat Mahin Nivase in this very life and era of the Gautam Supreme Buddha itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May the blessings of Chupa Gem be with you all. We'll now conclude there. May the noble Chupa Gem be with you all.